The Midnight Customer Story 1. The town of Raven Hill was small and quiet. Most nights nothing ever happened there. People locked their doors early. The streets stayed empty, and only the neon lights of the gas station glowed against the dark. On the edge of Main Street stood a single fast food restaurant, the KFC, where everyone in town came for chicken and fries. It usually closed at 11. By then the smell of grease and fried food drifted through the empty streets like a memory. But sometimes if you stayed long enough, if you were inside past midnight, strange things happened. But Jared was 17. He worked part-time at the KFC to save money for college. His manager usually handled the closing shift, but sometimes Jared volunteered to stay late. He needed the extra pay, and he told himself nothing bad could happen in such a boring little town. Most nights, he swept the floor, mopped up the grease, and wiped down the tables while the empty dining room echoed with the hum of fluorescent lights. By midnight he was usually done, alone in the building, waiting for morning. That Thursday night was no different. At first, the lights above his head flickered every now and then, buzzing like trapped insects. The fryer had been turned off, but the smell of old oil still clung to the air. Jared dragged the mop across the floor, yawning. Outside, the street was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked past 12. He thought about locking up and heading home. Then the front door rattled. Jared froze, the mop dripping water onto the tile. Someone was trying to open the door. He had locked it earlier. He was sure of that. He looked up and saw a man standing outside, pressed against the glass. The man was tall, pale, with black hair that fell across his forehead. He wore a long coat, even though the night was warm. His eyes were strange, too dark, too deep. He did not move. He only stared. Jared lifted a hand and mouthed the words, "Closed, sorry," but the man did not leave. His lips stretched slowly into a smile that looked practiced, as if he had to remind himself how to do it. Then, without Jared touching the lock, the door clicked open. The man stepped inside. "Sorry, we're closed," Jared said quickly, his voice shaking. "You can come back tomorrow." The man did not answer. He walked forward, each step echoing softly across the tiles. Jared noticed something odd. The floor was still wet from the mop, yet the man's shoes left no footprints. His coat swayed as if there were wind inside the restaurant, though the air was perfectly still. "What do you want?" Jared asked. Finally the man spoke. His voice was low, smooth, almost like a whisper. "I would like a bucket of chicken, extra crispy." Jared forced a laugh. "The fryers are off. I can't cook now." The man tilted his head. His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Check the kitchen. I know you still have some." Jared swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, but the way the man stared at him made his knees weak. It felt like a command, not a request. He turned and walked quickly into the kitchen, telling himself he would grab his phone, call the police, and lock himself in the storage room. But when he entered the kitchen, a foul smell hit him. It was not grease, not chicken. It was rotten, thick, like spoiled meat. He gagged and covered his mouth. He reached for the light switch, but before he touched it, the freezer door creaked open by itself. Cold mist rolled across the floor. Jared remembered shutting that door earlier. He remembered turning the lock. The shelves inside were stacked with boxes of frozen food, but on the lowest shelf, sitting in the pale blue light, was a red and white KFC bucket. Steam rose from it. Though the freezer was cold as ice, the smell grew stronger, and when Jared leaned closer, He saw what was inside: chicken pieces, fresh, golden, but mixed with something else, something pale. A human hand rested among the wings and drumsticks. Jared staggered back, locking into the counter. The clang rang through the empty kitchen. His stomach heaved. He tried to scream, but his throat locked up. Then a voice whispered behind him, close enough to touch his ear. "Extra crispy." Jared spun around. The man stood there, smiling wider than before. His eyes were two black pools. His skin looked too tight over his face. Jared shook his head. "I don't know what this is. I'm calling the cops." The man leaned closer. "You already served them." The lights flickered. For a moment, the room was completely dark. Jared felt the air move, heavy and thick, shadows crawling across the walls. When the light returned, the man was gone. Only the freezer door remained open, the bucket inside steaming with that horrible mix of chicken and flesh. Jared bolted into the office and grabbed the phone. His hands shook as he dialed 911. "Please," he cried. When the operator answered, "There's someone in the restaurant. He broke in. He's not normal. There's a hand in the freezer." The line went silent. Jared pressed the phone tighter to his ear. "Hello? Did you hear me? Please send someone." Finally a voice came through, but it was not the same calm operator's voice. It was low, smooth, familiar. "Would you like a bucket of chicken?" Jared dropped the phone. His scream echoed off the walls. He turned toward the doorway. The man was standing there again, blocking his escape, pointing toward the freezer. His voice boomed, deeper now, shaking the walls. "Bring it here." The floor trembled. The fryer rattled, though it was turned off. The smell of burning oil filled the air. Shadows dripped from the ceiling, like tar, sliding down the walls. The restaurant groaned, as if it were alive. Jared grabbed a tray and hurled it at the man, but it passed straight through him, as if he were smoke. The man flickered and reformed, his smile sharper than before. Jared ran. He shoved through the back door and stumbled into the alley. The night air was cold against his face. He gasped for breath and sprinted toward the street. His sneakers slapped against the pavement. He did not look back. He could not. He reached the gas station at the corner and banged on the locked glass door. The clerk inside jumped up and hurried over. Unlocking it, Jared burst inside, trembling, gasping for air. "Call the police," he begged. "There's someone in the KFC. Please, you have to call." The clerk frowned.
KFC? That place has been closed for years."
Jared stared at him, chest heaving. "No, I work there. I was just inside. I saw him. But when he turned toward the street, the restaurant was gone. The lot was empty. Only cracked concrete and weeds remained. No lights, no sign, no smell of fried chicken, nothing at all." Jared pressed his hands against the glass. His reflection stared back, pale and trembling. Behind it, just for a second, he thought he saw a tall man in a dark coat, smiling with sharp teeth, and then it was gone. That night, Jared never went home. By morning, his parents reported him missing. Some said he ran away. Others whispered the old KFC was cursed, that people who stayed past midnight never came back.
No one knew for sure, but sometimes, late at night, when the wind carried the faint smell of grease and smoke across Raven Hill, people swore they saw a neon sign flicker where the empty lot stood, and if you listened closely, you could hear a voice whispering from the shadows, "Would you like a bucket of chicken?"
The Haunted Kitchen, Story 2. There was a rumor about the old KFC on Brookside Avenue. Everyone in town had heard it, but no one liked to talk about it out loud. They said the kitchen was cursed. Workers quit after only a few weeks. Managers refused to stay late. Customers claimed their food sometimes tasted strange, as if it had been touched by something rotten. People laughed about it in the daytime, but at night, when the streets were quiet and the wind rattled the dumpsters behind the building, the rumor felt real. Angela did not believe in curses. She was 19 and had just started working there to pay for her college classes. She needed the job. Rent was high, tuition even higher, and she had no time to waste on ghost stories. The kitchen smelled like grease and bleach. The fryers hissed, the freezers hummed, nothing more. Still, she noticed the way her co-workers lowered their voices when the subject came up. She noticed the way the assistant manager crossed himself whenever he walked past the storage closet. On her third week, Angela was scheduled for the night shift, with only one other worker, a quiet man named David. He was in his late 20s, with tired eyes and a habit of chewing on his lip when he was nervous. He didn't talk much, but when she asked him why so many employees left, he finally said, "You'll see, just don't stay in the kitchen alone." Angela rolled her eyes. She thought it was another joke, but later that night, after the last customer left and the doors were locked, she began to understand. The building felt different. After midnight, the buzzing lights seemed harsher, the shadows deeper. The hum of the machines echoed too loud in the empty restaurant. Angela kept herself busy, scrubbing trays and wiping down counters, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just behind her. Every time she turned, no one was there. At one point, she heard the walk-in freezer door slam shut. She dropped the tray she was holding. It clattered to the floor. David was mopping near the lobby. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" he said, without looking up. "The freezer. It closed by itself." David's mop froze mid-swipe. Slowly, he raised his head, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. "Don't open it," he whispered. Angela frowned. "What are you talking about?" But when she turned back toward the kitchen, she saw that the freezer door was wide open. A faint mist spilled out, curling along the floor like smoke. She could swear she heard a sound coming from inside, not the usual hum of the cooling unit. Something else. A whisper. She took a step forward. The air grew colder. The whisper grew clearer. It sounded almost like her name, Angela. Her breath caught in her throat. She glanced back at David, but he was staring at the mop, refusing to meet her eyes. It was as if he already knew what was happening, as if he had seen it before. Angela forced herself forward. She reached the freezer door and peered inside. The shelves were stacked with boxes of frozen food, just as always, but the light flickered, and for a split second, she saw something between the boxes, a face, pale, eyeless, pressed against the glass of a sealed bag of frozen wings. The lips moved. "Angela." She staggered back, nearly slipping on the wet floor. The freezer light steadied. The face was gone. Only chicken and cardboard boxes remained. Her heart hammered in her chest. She shook her head, trying to laugh it off. "I'm just tired," she muttered, but when she turned around, the kitchen lights flickered too, and in the shadows near the fryers, she thought she saw someone standing there. She blinked. The space was empty, but the smell reached her then. Not grease, not bleach. It was the heavy, sour stench of rot drifting through the air. Angela tried to steady her breathing, but the smell in the air clung to her throat and made her gag. She walked quickly back to the sink, scrubbing her hands even though there was no reason to. Her skin burned under the hot water. Behind her, the kitchen was too quiet. The usual hum of the freezer and fryer seemed to fade, replaced by that faint whisper she had heard before. David finally walked into the kitchen. He set his mop aside and gave her a careful look.
You saw something, didn't you?
Angela shook her head, forcing a laugh. No, I just thought I did. It was nothing. David didn't smile. It's never nothing in this place. His voice was flat, heavy with something close to dread. Angela wanted to press him, to demand an explanation, but before she could speak, the fryer popped as if grease had boiled over. Both of them jumped. The machine was off, unplugged for the night, yet the metal lid rattled and hissed. Angela grabbed a towel and stepped closer, but David caught her wrist. "Don't," he whispered. His grip was cold and tight. She pulled her arm free. "It's just a fryer. Stop trying to scare me." But when she lifted the lid, a wave of heat rushed out. Inside, the oil bubbled furiously, golden and thick. Though no flame or power fed it, the smell of burning meat filled the air. Angela staggered back, covering her mouth. Something floated in the oil. At first, she thought it was a chicken wing, but then she saw fingers, human fingers, pale and blistered, drifting like meat in a stew. The lid slammed shut on its own. The fryer went still, silent again. Angela's heart pounded. She turned toward David, ready to shout at him for not reacting, but his face had gone white. He stepped back until his shoulders pressed against the tiled wall. "It's starting," he said. Angela's voice cracked. "What do you mean? What's starting?" "The kitchen doesn't want us here," he said. "It never does." Before Angela could respond, the lights flickered again. For a moment, the kitchen sank into total darkness. She heard footsteps, wet, heavy, dragging. They circled around her, behind the counters, past the storage closet, always just out of reach. She spun, trying to follow the sound, but when the lights snapped back on, the kitchen was empty. The freezer door slammed again, louder this time. Angela jumped, mist swirled across the floor. This time the whisper was clearer, and it came from every direction, echoing through the vents and the drains. "Angela," she covered her ears. "Stop it," she screamed. "You're not real." The drain beneath the sink gurgled in reply. Brown water bubbled up, thick and foul, spilling across the floor. The stench was unbearable. Angela stumbled back, slipping in the muck. David didn't move to help her. He stood frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Do something," she shouted. He shook his head. "You don't understand. Nothing we do matters. It's the kitchen. It always wins." Angela struggled to her feet, wiping the sludge from her shoes. "That's insane. This is just some wiring problem. Or maybe a prank." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. The smell, the whispers, the boiling fryer, they were too real, too impossible. She grabbed her phone from her pocket, her hand shaking as she tried to dial 911, but the screen flickered. The numbers melted, twisting into letters. One word appeared across the screen, glowing red. "Angela." Her phone went dark. Her chest tightened as panic clawed up her throat. She dropped the phone on the floor, where it shattered. The whispering grew louder, filling the kitchen until the walls seemed to hum with it. David finally spoke again. "It wants you." Angela spun toward him.
What are you talking about?
It chooses someone every time. Someone new. That's why. No one stays here long. They quit before it's their turn. His eyes glistened. I should have warned you. Angela's skin crawled. She backed away from him, bumping into the counter. This is crazy. You're crazy. But David didn't argue. He only lowered his gaze. The fryer lid rattled again. The freezer groaned. The storage closet door creaked open an inch, though no one touched it. From the darkness inside, Angela thought she saw shapes shifting, like shadows pressed against the walls. She grabbed a broom and held it like a weapon. Her voice shook. If this is some game, it's over. I'm leaving. She darted toward the back door, but when she pulled on the handle, it wouldn't budge. She twisted, yanked, slammed her shoulder against it, but the door felt like solid stone. It would not move. The whisper filled her ears again. Louder, urgent. Now, Angela, Angela. She covered her head with her arms. Stop it. The overhead light burst, showering glass across the floor. The kitchen plunged into a dim yellow glow from the emergency bulb above the exit. In that sick light, Angela saw movement, figures, faint and translucent, standing behind the counters, crouched near the fryer, crawling out of the freezer mist. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty, their mouths twisted in silent screams. David finally moved. He dropped to his knees, covering his face. Don't look at them, he begged. Don't look. Angela couldn't look away. The figures moved closer, their shapes flickering like static, their limbs bent at strange angles. One reached toward her with a dripping hand. She swung the broom wildly, but the figure passed right through it, leaving behind a cold that stung her skin. She stumbled backward, her heart slamming against her ribs. The figure circled her now, whispering her name in one long, endless hiss. Angela. The emergency light flickered, and for an instant the kitchen looked normal again. The counters were clean, the floor shiny, the freezer closed. David was gone. Only Angela stood there, shaking, clutching the broom. The light flickered again, and the figures returned, closer than before. Their voices merged into one, a single, inhuman sound that rattled the dishes and shook the walls. Angela dropped the broom. She pressed her hands against her ears and screamed. Angela's scream echoed through the kitchen, but the whispering only grew louder. The figures pressed closer, their eyeless faces hovering inches from hers. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the freezer door. The metal was ice cold, burning through her shirt. Her breath came in short gasps. Then the freezer door yawned open behind her. Mist rolled out, wrapping around her legs like chains. She tried to move, but the cold dragged her backward. She clawed at the counter, at the handle of the sink, anything to anchor herself, but the strength in her arms slipped away. Inside the freezer, the pale face she had glimpsed earlier appeared again. This time, it wasn't trapped in a bag. It floated freely in the icy air, a body forming beneath it, swollen and rotten, skin peeling away in strips. The lips moved once more. Angela, she shrieked, twisting free for a moment, but another figure blocked her path. It was David. His eyes were empty, his mouth open in a silent scream. His skin flickered like smoke, half there, half gone. He reached out with trembling hands. "No," Angela cried. "You're not real. You're not him." But the figure lunged, shoving her back into the freezer. The door slammed shut with a thunderous boom. The temperature dropped instantly. Her breath clouded in front of her face. The shelves around her shifted, the boxes splitting open on their own. Frozen chicken tumbled out, but mixed among it were shapes that made her stomach turn. Hands, feet, grey flesh, faces pressed against plastic, eyes frozen wide in terror. Angela pounded on the door. "Help! Somebody help me!" The only answer was laughter, low and cruel, rumbling from the very walls of the freezer. It was not human. It was the kitchen itself, alive, amused by her fear. She sank to her knees, sobbing. The mist coiled around her throat, squeezing, until she could barely breathe. Her vision blurred. She thought of her family, of her classes, of the simple life she had wanted, all of it slipping away into the dark. But then, through the frost, she saw something, the emergency release handle on the inside of the freezer door. It was only a few feet away, summoning the last of her strength. She crawled toward it, her fingers numb and stiff. The mist clawed at her legs, pulling her back, but she stretched out her arm and grabbed the handle. She yanked it down. The door swung open, spilling her out onto the greasy kitchen floor. She gasped, the warm air of the restaurant flooding her lungs. The whispers shrieked in anger, a chorus of voices dissolving into static. Angela staggered to her feet and bolted for the front door. She expected it to be locked, but this time it flew open at her touch. She stumbled out into the night, the cool air rushing against her burning skin. The parking lot was empty. The lights inside the restaurant flickered violently, shadows darting across the windows. Then, just as suddenly, everything went dark. The KFC stood silent, as if nothing had ever happened. Angela collapsed on the pavement, trembling, staring at the building. A moment later, the front door creaked open. For a second, she thought David might step out, but no one did. Only the smell of rot drifted into the night before the door eased shut again. Angela never returned to work. She told people she had quit because of school, but in her heart she knew the truth. The kitchen had wanted her, and somehow she had escaped. But she also knew not everyone had been so lucky. Months later, when the restaurant closed for renovations, workers found something sealed behind the walls of the storage closet. Old uniforms, name tags, bones wrapped in plastic. No one could explain it. The manager swore the items hadn't been there before. The police made a report, but the case was left unresolved. Angela moved away from Brookside Avenue, but sometimes at night she dreamed of the freezer. She dreamed of the whisper calling her name, and every time she passed a KFC in another town, she caught that same faint smell of grease and rot, and she wondered if the kitchen had truly let her go. Delivery to Nowhere Story 3. Marcus had worked as a delivery driver for KFC for almost a year. Most nights were easy. He would load up bags of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits, and then drive across town to hungry families or college kids pulling all-nighters. He liked the job because it was simple, and he could listen to music in his old car while he drove. But one Friday night in October, he received an order that changed everything. The ticket printed from the machine just before closing. It was late, almost midnight, and Marcus was ready to head home. But the order was strange. It was huge. 3 buckets of chicken, 6 sides, a stack of biscuits, and a gallon of sweet tea. The total was higher than any order he had ever seen. He sighed, packed it up, and glanced at the address. It wasn't one he recognized. The receipt read, Kenchwan, Ashwood Lane. Marcus frowned. Ashwood Lane wasn't on his usual route. He pulled out his phone and searched the map. The GPS found it, but the road was marked in faded gray, with no street view, as if no one had updated it in years. He thought about asking the manager to cancel the order, but she was already in her office counting cash. If Marcus refused, she would just find someone else, and he needed the money. With a shrug, he slung the heavy bags over his shoulder and headed out to his car. The night air was cold, and the sky was moonless. Marcus started the engine, set the GPS, and pulled out of the parking lot. The streets were quiet, most of the town already asleep. He turned onto roads he didn't recognize, each darker and emptier than the last. Street lights grew scarce, until finally there were none at all. Only the beams of his headlights cut through the dark. The GPS voice guided him steadily. Turn left in half a mile, continue straight for 3 miles. Marcus drummed his fingers on the wheel, trying to ignore the unease growing in his chest. The road narrowed, lined with twisted trees that clawed at the sky. Their branches scraped against one another in the wind, making a sound like whispers. After what felt like forever, he spotted the sign, Ashwood Lane. The wooden board was cracked and half rotted, leaning at an angle. Marcus hesitated. The lane looked more like a path, covered in leaves and broken asphalt, but the GPS urged him forward. He turned in. His tires crunched over debris. The trees grew denser, blocking out what little light remained. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly. No houses in sight. Marcus glanced at the food bag in the passenger seat. The smell of fried chicken filled the car, but for the first time, it didn't make him hungry. It made him feel sick. Finally, through the trees, he saw a light. A house stood at the end of the lane, tall and narrow, with peeling paint and windows that glowed faintly yellow. It looked abandoned, yet someone had clearly placed the order. Marcus parked near the front steps. The house loomed above him, crooked shutters rattling in the wind. He grabbed the food and forced himself to walk up the creaking porch. The wood groaned under his weight. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. KFC delivery, he called. His voice echoed strangely, as if the house swallowed the sound. At last, the door inched open. The hallway beyond was dark, except for a single flickering light deeper inside. Marcus peered in, shifting the bag of food nervously. "Hello? I've got your order." Silence. A shadow moved at the far end of the hall. Marcus froze. It was tall, too tall, with arms that seemed to brush the floor. It didn't walk. It glided. Marcus's throat went dry. Your food's here," he whispered. The shadow stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the front door creaked wider, as if inviting him in.
Marcus stepped back. "Look, I'll just leave it on the porch, okay?"
He set the bags down carefully and turned to leave. But when he looked at his car, his blood turned to ice. The headlights were off, the engine was silent, and sitting in the driver's seat was another shadow, its head bent low as if waiting for him to return. Marcus stumbled back toward the house. His chest heaved, panic rising. Behind him, the porch door slammed shut, trapping him in the darkness of Ashwood Lane. Marcus's hands shook as he stared at his car. The shadow inside did not move. Its head was tilted, almost touching the steering wheel. Its body blurred, as if it were made of smoke. The sight made his stomach twist. He wanted to run to the car, but every nerve in his body screamed not to. Something told him that if he opened that door, he would never drive away again. He turned back toward the house. The bags of food still sat on the porch where he had dropped them. Steam curled from the open boxes. Though he hadn't opened them, the smell was wrong now. Not fried chicken, not biscuits. It was sour and rancid, like meat left in the sun. The porch light flickered, then died, leaving him in darkness. Marcus fumbled for his phone. He pulled it out, but the screen glowed only for a moment before the words appeared. Turn around. His heart nearly stopped. He dropped the phone, and it shattered on the wood. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. Instead, he reached for the door, pushing it open wider, and stepped into the house. The air inside was colder than the night. The floorboards creaked under his shoes. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, the light at the far end flickering weakly. He swallowed hard. "Hello?" His voice cracked. I've got your food." Something shifted in the shadows. A whisper floated back to him. Too faint to understand, it sounded like several voices speaking at once. Marcus took a few steps forward. The door slammed behind him. He jumped and spun, but the door had vanished. Where it should have been was nothing but more hallway stretching into the dark.
"No," Marcus muttered.
No. He tried to run back, but no matter how far he went, the hallway only grew longer. The air thickened, heavy like smoke. His chest burned. He stopped, gasping, and leaned against the wall. The wallpaper peeled under his hand, sticky and damp. When he pulled his hand away, it was streaked with something dark. The whispering grew louder, filling the hall. Marcus pressed his palms over his ears, but the sound was inside his head now. Words formed out of the hiss. Hungry, hungry, hungry. His stomach twisted. He realized the smell had changed again. It was fresh, greasy fried chicken, warm and inviting. He turned, and the bags he had left on the porch were now at his feet. The boxes inside were open, pieces of chicken golden and steaming. His throat went dry. He hadn't eaten all shift. Against his will, he reached for a drumstick. His fingers trembled as he lifted it. The smell was intoxicating. He bit into it.
Blood filled his mouth.
Marcus gagged and dropped the piece. It hit the floor with a wet slap. In the dim light, he saw it wasn't chicken at all. It was a human finger, gnawed to the bone where he had bitten it. He stumbled back, retching, wiping at his mouth until his skin burned. The whispering turned into laughter, harsh and cruel. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Figures stood at the edges of the hallway, half hidden in the shadows. Their limbs were long, their faces hollow, skins stretched thin like paper. They swayed, twitching with every flicker of the light. Marcus bolted. His footsteps echoed as he ran down the hall, past the figures, past the whispering, past the smell of rot that clung to every breath. The hallway twisted, turned, but no matter how far he went, it never ended. Finally, he burst into a room. It looked like a dining room, but everything was wrong. The table stretched the entire length of the room, covered in plates and bowls. Steam rose from the food piled high. Chicken, mashed potatoes, corn, biscuits. At first glance it looked normal, but when Marcus stepped closer, his stomach turned. The chicken was gray flesh. The potatoes were heaps of fat. The corn was rows of teeth strung together. And around the table sat the diners. They were shadows, but not empty ones. Their eyes glowed faintly, their mouths dripping with grease and blood as they tore into the feast. None of them looked at Marcus. They just ate, tearing with their hands, ripping, chewing, swallowing. The sound filled the room, wet and sickening. Marcus staggered back. His chest heaved. He wanted to scream, but the sound lodged in his throat. Then one of the diners turned. Its glowing eyes locked on him. The others followed, one by one, until every head at the table was facing Marcus. Their jaws moved in unison, and the whisper filled the room again. "Stay." Marcus shook his head violently. No, I'm not staying here." The shadows rose from their chairs. They were taller now, their heads scraping the ceiling. They reached for him with long, dripping fingers. Marcus bolted again. Crashing through a side door, he tumbled into another hallway, this one narrower, the walls closing in. The air pressed against him like water. He ran, clawing his way forward, until he stumbled into another room. It was a kitchen, not like the one at the KFC, but older, filthier. Rusted stoves lined the walls. Knives hung from hooks, their blades dark with old stains. A single light bulb swung overhead, casting dizzying shadows. On the counter sat the delivery bags. He stared at them in horror. He had left them on the porch. He had seen them in the hallway. Now they were here again, waiting for him. The bags moved. Slowly, the paper crinkled, bulging from within. A pale hand pushed through the top, followed by an arm, then a face. Marcus staggered back as a figure climbed out of the bag like it was a coffin. Its eyes were black, its mouth stretched wide. The other bags shifted too, more hands and faces pushing through, more bodies crawling out. Their whispers merged into a roar. Marcus turned to flee, but the doorway was gone, only solid wall. He was trapped. The figures moved closer, their bodies twisting unnaturally, their limbs scraping the floor. One reached for him, its hand brushing his shoulder. The cold sank deep into his bones. Marcus screamed. Marcus stumbled backward as the figures crawled from the bags, their limbs snapping at strange angles, their mouths opening wider than humanly possible. The sound of tearing paper and cracking bone filled the kitchen. Their whispers thundered through his skull, repeating the same word over and over.
Stay. Stay.
Marcus's back hit the counter. His hands fumbled across the cold metal until they closed around something sharp, a kitchen knife. He yanked it free from its hook and swung wildly. The blade passed through one of the creatures, but instead of cutting it, the knife tore through air. The figure shivered, then split into two identical shapes, both reaching for him now. Marcus dropped the knife in horror. His chest heaved, his lungs burning. He had to find a way out. His eyes darted around the room. A small window sat above the sink, fogged with grime. It looked too narrow, but it was the only chance he had. He sprinted toward it, climbing onto the counter, shoving at the glass. It didn't budge. He slammed his shoulder into it, again and again, until the pane cracked. The creature shrieked, a sound so loud it made the bulb overhead burst, plunging the room into darkness. Cold hands wrapped around his ankles, yanking him down. He kicked wildly, his foot connecting with something that crunched. For a split second, the grip loosened. He drove his elbow into the cracked glass. It shattered, slicing into his arm, but he didn't care. He pulled himself through the jagged frame, glass tearing his clothes, cutting his skin. Behind him, the whispers rose to a deafening roar. Fingers clawed at his legs, but he dragged himself free, tumbling out into the night. Marcus landed hard in the dirt, He scrambled to his feet, gasping. The house loomed above him, its windows glowing like eyes, the shadows pressed against the glass, dozens of them, watching. He staggered toward his car, praying it was still there. To his shock, the headlights flicked on, the engine rumbled to life. For a moment he thought the nightmare might be over, but then he saw the figure still sitting in the driver's seat. The shadow turned its head slowly, its black eyes locking with his, its mouth stretched into a smile too wide for its face. "No," Marcus whispered. "No, no, no." He spun and ran down the road, away from the house, away from the car, away from Ashwood Lane. Branches clawed at his arms, roots caught his feet, but he didn't stop. He ran until his lungs burned, until the trees thinned, until he stumbled onto a familiar street. Behind him, Ashwood Lane was gone. Only empty forest, stretched where the sign should have been. Marcus collapsed on the curb, shaking, blood dripping from his cuts. The food bags were gone, his phone shattered, his car vanished. Only the echo of whispers lingered in his ears, fading with the night wind. When morning came, a jogger found him still sitting there, pale and trembling. He tried to explain what had happened, but the man only shook his head. "There hasn't been a house on Ashwood Lane for 50 years. That road's been closed since the fire." Marcus never delivered food again. He quit the job the same day, but no matter where he went, he couldn't escape the memory. Sometimes at night, he would hear the voice of the GPS in his dreams. Turn left in half a mile, continue straight for 3 miles. And sometimes, when he walked past a dark alley or an empty road, he could swear he saw headlights waiting for him and a shadow sitting in the driver's seat, smiling.